Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sakari Lukimaa and I'm the managing partner of Castrén Snellman. In this role and on behalf of our firm, I want to warmly welcome you to Legal 500 Green Summit Finland 2022. Great to have you here. Wonderful to see a lot of faces physically here at our offices, and it's also good to note that a lot of colleagues, a lot of people are participating online. Great to have you all here. Firstly, I want to thank Legal 500 for this opportunity to organize this event in cooperation with you. We are definitely honored to act in this role and contribute to this important event. Secondly, and more importantly even, I want to thank Legal 500 for taking an active role in facilitating discussion on this crucially, critically important topic, the megatrend, the green transition. We lawyers are not necessarily considered as the key initiators or the ultimate decision makers in the green transition. Some even criticize us for putting too much emphasis, too much focus on how things are and not how they should be. However, no one should underestimate the power of lawyers in making things happen or not making them happen. The implementation of the green transition requires a massive amount of regulation, piles of agreements, putting together code of conduct rules, just to mention something. And needless to say, the role of us lawyers in contributing this is very large. Now, it is for us to decide whether we take an active role in making things happen, in making a positive difference, and making ultimately a world a better place. Lots is discussed nowadays about the purpose of work and also purpose of our line of work as lawyers. And it is not too difficult to find purpose in making the green transition happen for our part. Today in this event, we are here to learn, we're here to discuss, we are here to exchange ideas, how to make the green transition happen and what is the role of us lawyers in this all. With these words, I wish you a fruitful, good Green Summit event. Next, a few words from Anna from Legal 500, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Also from me, a big welcome to the Green Summit Finland, the very first event in connection with our Global Green Guide. I'm Anna Bauberg, I'm the editor of the Global Green Guide. Quick plug straight away, if you haven't seen it yet or perhaps haven't heard of it yet, the Green Guide and the Green Hub are two relatively new products in the Legal 500 portfolio. They both focus specifically on the legal sector's contribution to a green transition. So the Green Guide specifically addresses private practice, so exploring law firms' work in the space of sustainability, ESG with a big focus on the E, and climate change mitigation and so on. But as well, we look at sort of the other side, which is the internal best practices, any other internal initiatives, thought leadership and so on as well. And then the Green Hub is sort of an additional dedicated space on our Legal 500 platform, which intends to show a bit of a broader view, not just from private practice, but also from the in-house counsel side of things, as well as any other actors in the legal sector, really. So again, if you're interested in anything to do with sustainability, with climate change, net zero, ESG, and so on, hopefully this will be a nice news source for you to go and find some interesting, thought-provoking material. So so do go check it out. We recently, at the beginning of the year, launched the very first EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, Africa Green Guide, and we will very soon be launching the first US as well as Latin America Green Guides. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. We've got some really hopefully thought-provoking panel sessions coming up. And I think in the past sort of year, 2 years that I've been specifically working around this topic, if there's one thing that I have learned is that really collaboration, the sharing of experiences, of best practices, of opinions is really key when it comes to integrating sustainability. So I think events like these today are just such a good opportunity to come together, to connect, to communicate, to share that know-how. It's just, yeah, like I say, really nice to be at a live event again as well. So thank you very much for joining in person today. Of course, we did also make this a hybrid event. So if you're joining virtually, remotely, online, thank you very much for tuning in as well. Of course, a big thank you also has to go to our speakers. Yeah, thank you so much for participating, and we're really looking forward to you sharing your insights with us today. Last but not least, of course, a big thank you to Castrén Snellman, our sponsors, really for making this event happen in the first place, and also just for supporting the Global Green Guide project from the start. So I think in the spirit of wanting to be a bit more, to be interactive, in the spirit of exchanging know-how and expertise and insights and so on, we do encourage you to ask questions. So of course, we're looking forward to hearing from our speakers, but please don't be afraid to ask questions and make your own comments during the sessions as well. So there will be a dedicated time at the end of each panel session for some Q&A. So if you are here in the audience in person, there will be microphones that are going to be handed around. If I might ask you please to just wait until you actually have the microphone to ask your question. That will make things easier so everyone can hear. And then if you are joining remotely, please also do use the online chat Q&A function, and I will personally be keeping an eye on that and will present those questions to the speakers at the end of each panel. So without further ado, and because I think you'd much rather hear from the speakers than from me, I'd like to hand over to Minna Korhonen, who will be chairing the first panel on accelerating the green transition through sustainable finance. Thank you very much for joining, and looking forward to chatting to some of you later.
Good afternoon, all. I'm happy to be chairing this panel called Accelerating the Green Transition Through Sustainable Finance. I'm here with 3 experts: Annina Tanhuanpää from OP Financial Group, Director, ESG and Responsibility; Tita Anttila, General Counsel at Nordic Environment Finance Corporation; and Maria Neuvius, Head of Debt Financing Team at Nrep. Before I let these ladies begin with their introductions and their own views on this topic matter, I have gathered some highlights, some key driving factors behind sustainable finance, and touch upon some of the current regulatory initiatives and guidelines. So here I have a slide summarizing the development around these areas and matters in the EU. ESG matters are coming more and more into focus in all areas of business and are the biggest challenge of our time. Sustainable finance has a key role to play in this field, both in public and private sector. Sustainable finance means business activities within the financial sector that promote sustainable development goals. As the name implies, it usually refers to loan financing and investing that have or takes environmental and social considerations into account. From the EU perspective, the EU European Green Deal sets out how to make the Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. This deal covers all sectors of the economy. This has been followed by the Commission presentation in September 2020, its 2030 climate target plan, with an increased emission reduction target of 55% by 2030 as compared to the 1990 levels. In order to meet these targets, EU needs to invest approximately 350 billion euro more every year during the next decade than it did during the previous decade. So it's a huge number. In July 2021, European Commission updated its previous action plan, which was issued in 2018, and adopted an ambitious and comprehensive package of measures to help to improve the flow of funds to sustainable finance, towards financing the transition towards this target. The enhanced action plan included also the following regulations, which have a huge effect on the financing sector. Regulation on sustainability-related disclosures in the financial services sector. The goal of this regulation is to strengthen the investor protection. And then there's, of course, the well-known taxonomy regulation for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Many countries have had their own taxonomies to which define what is sustainable. But now we need to have an EU taxonomy to provide clarity on which economic activities can be classified as environmentally sustainable. And of course, there are technical screening criteria for different economic activities to come as lower tier regulation as Commission delegated acts. In addition to these EU regulations, also the market participants have put their work on this important issue, and both the International Capital Market Association and the Loan Market Association have provided their own guidelines and principles in order to support sustainable economic activity, and of course also in order to avoid greenwashing. ICMA, International Capital Markets Association, has issued green bond principles, social bond principles, the sustainability bond guidelines, and sustainably linked bond principles. And LMA has issued similar principles for the loan market. Of course, these principles are voluntary. There are no sanctions related to those if you don't adhere. But apparently, all the market participants are adhering to this and taking these into account in their own work and green financing frameworks. So all of these regulations and principles serve as a basis for the future in sustainable finance and have a huge effect on all of the participants. Now I'm delighted to give a floor to our panelists so they can introduce themselves and share their first thoughts on this topic. Annina, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Castrén Snellman, and thank you, Legal 500, for this kind invitation. And I'm very pleased to be here today in this great summit. My name is Annina Tanhuanpää. I am OP Financial Group's ESG and Responsibility Director, and I lead our group's sustainability work. In practice, this means that I am in charge of our target setting for our sustainability targets, measuring those, setting up the metrics, and then also our responsibility reporting and our external engagements towards our stakeholders like UN Global Compact or UN Principles for Responsible Banking. I know that OP Financial Group is very familiar to everyone in Finland, but I still wanted to take and show you some key figures which I think that are relevant for the contribution towards sustainable finance and financing the green transition. Our market share is high in all our business segments. So we are leading in loans, both corporate and households, retail loans, deposits, non-life insurance and life insurance. And these are very high numbers, and obviously this means that with this kind of market share there becomes big impact, but then again a very big responsibility to work and operate in a responsible way. And OP Financial Group has set last year new strategic priorities, and responsible business is one of them. Also, in terms of doing good and in terms of financing the green transition, our total assets contribute a lot, and in comparison, for example, the central government budget on a yearly basis without the additions is around 70 billion euros. So these figures demonstrate the volumes and the capability to finance our clients. I also wanted to give two examples of two different products. I know that there are a lot of lawyers who are very familiar with these topics, but I nevertheless wanted to demonstrate the difference between these two. So we can, in a big picture, divide the sustainable finance into two buckets. One of them is financing when we talk about the project, using kind of financing the use of proceeds to a project which is in most cases green in itself, like financing wind turbines, windmills, and other similar projects to fight against the climate change, help enabling the climate change adaptation or mitigation. And then there's another bucket which is more related to the company, where the company itself sets the targets, sustainability targets they want to set. And it has to be meaningful to the company and their industry. And I can give you two examples. For example, for a grocery store, reducing food waste could be one very good sustainability target. And if the company meets the targets, then the coupon of the loan can be lowered. Another example could be in the construction business, for example, lowering or reducing the number of work-related accidents. But in any case, it has to come from the company's industry. It has to be meaningful and material for the company operating. But this is a good distinction between these two buckets. Social loans only related to social purposes would be another bucket, but I didn't take it here as an example because we are talking about the green transition. Thank you.
So, hello everybody. I'm likewise very happy to be here to take part in this summit. I am representing a rather different kind of entity doing sustainable finance. So my name is Tita Anttila. I'm the General Counsel for Nefco. And Nefco is an international financial institution. And I thought I would take some time to go through these in order for you to learn to know more about Nefco, as we are not as known in the Nordics as are is OP Corporation. So, an international financial institution. We have been established by the Nordic countries for 32 years ago. We are, as an international financial institution, not regulated. We are not following the Finnish law or any other Nordic law. We are We are governed by our constituent documents and the own legal framework. But the purpose why we were established by the Nordic countries jointly is green financing. So this is what we have been doing exclusively for 32 years. And with our own capital paid in by the Nordic countries and with external funds we are managing for green finance. When at Nefco we talk about financing, we talk about projects. So each project we evaluate against the EU taxonomy, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and our own environmental and sustainability criteria, which is actually much older than either of the before mentioned. So developed over the 32 years of history. Then each client needs to report on concrete environmental results, both during project implementation as well as after. Since we are a government-financed institution, it's very important that the additionality is there. We are not competing with the commercial banks. We have a different role, which is to bridge the financing gap where there is one. So we can provide loans, equity, mezzanine-type financing for example, Nordic SMEs, green solutions or green technology, which has a potential for global scale-up. So we are not financing the domestic market in any of the Nordic countries. The aim with the money is that it goes to international markets for companies who are, Nordic companies who are entering the markets outside of the Nordic countries. We are working a lot on the municipal sector in Eastern Europe. That's where we started. That was the first aim to do good and to improve the ecological state of the Baltic Sea through the catchment area. So wastewater treatment plants in Baltic countries, in St. Petersburg, we have been involved in those and financed them back in the days when after the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990. And today, blended financing, loans and grants, what we have been doing for over 10 years is to finance the modernization of the energy efficiency of public buildings, district heating and wastewater treatment plants in Ukraine, which, as you can imagine, has had an impact on this spring since February 24th. But we are very determined, as are the Ukrainians, to build back better in the country and take part in those rebuilding efforts when the time comes. Then again, Nefco is doing some results-based financing. So when private companies are delivering clean energy solutions in different countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we can combine this with the grant funding, which is paid out against the results delivered by the private actor. And expecting return on impact is what is the most important thing. Our owners, the Nordic countries, that is what they are measuring our success on. Also, we are based in Helsinki, but we are not a Finnish institution. We are Nordic. These are some key figures. So paid in capital, 130 million. We are doing a lot with fairly small amounts. Investment by Nefco can be up to euro 5 million, 50% of the total financing, which then means that we are quite often co-financing with commercial banks, with other bilateral and international institutions. 400 active projects at the end of 2021, and we have done our first environmental reporting based on the taxonomy and come to the conclusion that 76% of those projects are taxonomy eligible. Thank you for this possibility to introduce Nefco, and I would like to hand over to Maria, who's in Denmark taking part virtually.
Thank you. And yes, I'm Maria Nuovius, located in Helsinki with Nrep, but today in Denmark, as we're having our Nrep Summer Summit for 600 people here in Denmark tomorrow. And today our DEP team is meeting up here. And I'm really sorry for you in Helsinki who need to look at me at the big screen, because I have a hard time sitting still, at least for an hour. So I'm concentrating on that. And I myself have a history from law firms, been with Castrén Snellman all the way up to 2018. And since that, I was 2 years with the Finnish Minerals Group, so did the financing for Terrafame mine. And that was very interesting from the financing perspective to see how something really brown turned into very green as part of the EV value chain. Then since 2 years back, been with Nrep, and it's a very traditional real estate industry where financing is traditional. So it is a different change to get the green elements into that. And shortly about Nrep. Nrep is founded in 2005 with the intention to make real estate better. So sustainability has been part of Nrep since the start, and everything has been about making a difference and taking an active role in the green transition. And everything has been done around this, both when it comes to the social side and environmental side, all the way back from 2005. And there was a lot of lighthouse projects and special projects where we tested what can be done in this area. And then it was a little frustrating around 4 years ago when we started realizing that others are doing the same, and then they're always reporting better than us. Because Nrep is a very entrepreneurial company where bureaucracy is hindering making a difference. But I would say since 4 years back, it's been a lot of concentration on the delivery systems, that how do you actually show what you do on the sustainability side? How do you document it and evidence it so that others can see that what kind of results do we do? And it's now moved much more into doing not only special projects, but in everything we do. So these delivery systems have given us insight on what can we actually achieve. And that's one of the things we have done, that we've put own targets, which are much more, much higher than the ones that are on the general level. So if you want to change to the next page, what Nrep has been doing is that we're putting a CO2 target for us, that by 2028, we want to be carbon neutral. A milestone in 2025, we should have these innovative projects where we can show that we have 100% carbon neutral. It's possible to build something 100% carbon neutral. We're working on those projects already now. And then not only, as I said, the special projects, but everything we do, we're now putting targets on ourselves. So we're reducing the carbon dioxide with 33% in new projects during next year, reduce emissions from operations by at least 50% during next year, and then that all new projects must be certified and climate compensated. So it's basically a very big part of our DNA and everything we do. And how does this come into financing is that any project we do is financed most likely on a project level, project by project. So we're looking for financing for all of these projects. We're not working specifically on getting green financing, but we see that whatever we do is green, and we should be the preferred borrower when the banks looks at projects and what can you do in real estate. And we more look at this, as somebody said earlier, it's all about collaboration. We work very closely with our banks to find solutions that how can we actually work around this together? How can we find reportings and processes that work? And we probably raise it later in discussion, but we work a lot on the operational models and to find ways to document and to evidence what we do. And it's not easy. because it's not clear on the financing side, but that's where we do. And hopefully, of course, we could also see that in the pricing of the financing, that the green financing would be better for us. But thank you, everyone.
So thank you all for the good introductions to this subject. And let's move on to the actual panel discussion. The first topic would be the newest trends in sustainable finance. Annina, would you like to start?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. But before I answer to your question about the new trends, I would like to go back to the roots and origin of this summit, which is the climate change, and to the Paris Climate Agreement. We have seen a lot of climate target setting in the industry, and we have to be extremely pleased for all of those. But at the moment, the carbon budget for 1.5 degrees warming is approaching too quickly. And according to the IPCC newest reports, the pace is not sufficient. And this means that if this pace continues, we have to do more, we have to do quicker, and the required actions will be much sharper and more rapid. And this is something that we are constantly thinking from the risk management point of view. But answering to your real question, I would like to raise biodiversity. This is something that is at the moment very much on my table. We have seen and we see that the taxonomy requirements are now moving and developing to cover more environmental issues, not just the climate ones. And that means that we need to understand better our, as a bank, impact to the nature and to the biodiversity. And why is that? It's because the loss of biomass and the biodiversity is threatening our food supplies. We see now from the very, very horrible Ukraine war, what does it mean when there are hiccups in the international food supply chains? And if we add to these kind of war-related situations also biodiversity, it becomes very, very dramatic. And we have to do something about that because that really threatens our well-being. And that is the reason why we are looking at that. And we know that a growing number of companies and other banks and entities are, of course, committing to work towards to meet the biodiversity goals and to have less impact on the nature. And everybody is interested in setting up very ambitious biodiversity targets. But for us, it means that if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. And that's why we need to build methodologies, tools and metrics and to measure our footprint on the nature and the biodiversity. And this is something that we are at the moment doing. At some point, it will obviously flow also to the finance. But as a bank, what does it mean? I try to give a very concrete example. I think that these are most interesting ones. If we finance an industrial building, which is, for example, in the wasteland, we could advise our client not to build it entirely and leave maybe something around, some nature around it, so that there would be hay or grass, some flowers. And why is that this is important? It's, for example, very important for the pollinators. And if there's a sufficiently rich flora, sufficiently rich number of flowers, it's good for the pollinators and so on. And it's very important and interesting to actually see that this is something that the European Central Bank, which is supervising us, has presented exactly the same observation in their expectations towards climate change and environmental risk mitigation guidelines. So this very soft sounding tool is actually very critical. So this is something that I would raise as a news trend.
That's very interesting. Thank you. What about you, Tita?
Well, in our eyes, of course, the EU taxonomy is something that is very much on the table. But I would like to echo Annina on the fact that it is true that more should be done and quicker. and this can be done through finance as well. And the EU taxonomy, of course, is providing tools for that, and there will be the biodiversity parts are not yet something that the corporations need to, or financiers need to report on, but those are coming as well and very quickly. One thing that is new for Nefco is that we have adopted the first ever exclusion list this year. So something that the international financial institutions often have, most of them have that. We have not had it because we have been doing only environmental projects, and this has been financing them, and this has been the thought that it's something we know that exists. But the governments in the Nordic countries, they have we follow their lead and their mandate, and Nefco is no longer providing financing to fossil fuel enabled projects. So that is something that is a rather strict rule.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good, and I like what you said about doing more and quicker, because that's exactly what we try to do with our own targets. But do the banks like that? Not really. We don't see that in reality, because every time we want to be innovative and do something more and something different that has been done in ordinary, old-fashioned real estate, it's too risky. So the banks still tend to look at it as traditional real estate financing, and to some extent the taxonomy and all the regulations coming up are actually limiting some of this, because it gets more tick the box. And we know, for example, now we're working with some banks, a lot of cooperation with the banks around how to fit in the taxonomy and how to fit in the extra we do on top of the taxonomy in the green financing. And this is where I see that what is right now for us on the table is that how will the banks understand the taxonomy and the other green financing initiatives, the transition, the one that is in between taxonomy and brown, and how can we document that, how can we evidence that, and how can we actually benefit from doing something more. And another thing we see that we work on that is getting more and more concrete for us is the operational side. There has the green financing has more on a principal side, quite easy with some certificates. But how do we now get all of these requirements and reportings, not only for the green financing, but everything around the taxonomy on the operational level and in our internal processes? So that's where we have put a lot of efforts and also trying to find good solutions together with the banks.
Thank you, Maria. So the taxonomy regulation was already brought up in the first question, but the next one is also about it. And how do you see that the taxonomy regulation is changing the requirements that the financiers and investors impose on, particularly from your company's perspective in practice?
Well, since even if we are not regulated in a sense that we would need to be obliged to report under the taxonomy or based on it, this is what we are doing today. So all projects are evaluated against the taxonomy. Information is required from the clients, and we are of course also evaluating those projects under the taxonomy that are not happening in the or not implemented in the EU countries. So or even in Africa, everything falls under this. So this is something that we are very much working with the clients. And this is also what Nefco does, that this very close cooperation with clients. And what I would like to say regarding the taxonomy as well, and based on our experience, is that it may improve the SMEs' access to funding if you can show how your business is falling under the taxonomy, and it can increase your competitive advantage when you're acting as a supplier or in the supply chain of a company that is already now required to report under the large unlisted companies who need to provide that information. So it's easier to accept you into the supply chain.
Yeah, I think that was an excellent point, because if you think this, that businesses and companies are seeing it as more than like it's an advantage for them, not like a burden they have to carry in order to comply with some regulation. Yes. I think, and that has been the change during I think like the past 2 years, like the attitude change towards this matter. What about you, Maria? You already touched upon this taxonomy issue, but do you have anything like all the reporting issues at least?
Yeah, we see it quite complicated from the side that the taxonomy, there is still a lot of details that needs to be fixed. It still differs in different countries. And we, for example, know that in Denmark, where the requirements are such that we will have a hard time to get real estate that are eligible to fulfill the taxonomy requirements. And then also just the taxonomy as such, it's telling us that how should we report on the taxonomy? What kind of documentation should we have? What kind of evidence should we have? How should we show do not significant harm? So there is still a lot to do. And for us, we're not really concentrating solely on the taxonomy. It's one part. But on top of that, we have several different operational systems where we walk through the life cycle of our investments. And taxonomy is one of those. So what I hope is that it's not all going to be concentrated on the taxonomy, but you could still get green financing also for something else. Maybe not called the same green, but things, other projects and innovations that make a difference.
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you have a comment on that?
Yes. Yeah, I could comment also. It's good that, Tita, you mentioned SMEs and Maria also the need for financing other than taxonomy-based finance. And I, to some extent, share the criticism towards taxonomy. It's easy to see why it's being criticized. It's burdensome, detailed, yes, not finished, still developing, yes. But then again, it makes the real-life impacts visible, and it's a very important tool to mitigate the climate change. This is something that we have to admit, because now we have a comparable measures. It's much more difficult to state something and claim something to be green if you cannot prove it. And also, I think it's a very good risk management tool also, both for financial institutions like us, and then for the corporates. And also, it allows you to issue more sustainability related finance products to our clients, and we see this huge demand, and to some extent it can be also explained by taxonomy, because it is a requirement at the moment. And as you brought it up, the SMEs, it is very true that actually the taxonomy will spread much wider than also for the listed large corporation, and that's from our point of view is from EBA's Pillar 3 requirements, which means that we need to have much more granular information of our clients so that we can report soon our green asset ratio in our taxonomy activities for large corporates. That's from 2024 onwards. We obviously need to start building that database earlier. And then for BTAR, which means banking book taxonomy alignment ratio, which is mid-24 for smaller corporates. And this means that actually the requirements will flow to the SMEs. And at the end of the day, from our perspective, it's all about capital requirements. We need to reserve more capital also for climate change and climate-related and environmental-related risks.
And if I may add to what Maria was saying, it's definitely not only taxonomy eligible or aligned projects get financing. It's very important to remember that there are plenty of good environmental projects that do need to be financed, and we want to be there doing that. And that's actually it's a lot of the things that we do.
Yes.
Maybe I could comment one thing about reporting. As you said, that it's flowing down to the companies, and the banks require it for different perspectives, both for the taxonomy and for also other. And we're working a lot around our databases for sustainability, and we're doing the GRESS reporting, and we have a lot of other standard reporting. And I continuously get the question that what is the standard that the banks will be using? We have close to 20 banks that we work with, and there is no standard. So we get a lot of different format requests to provide banks information, not only on taxonomy, but also on all the other internal reportings they have. And this would be very helpful for us, at least, if there could be some standardization so we could get it into our systems in a better way.
True. Yeah, definitely. And this very well leads to our third questions, kind of already answers it, that what are the main obstacles to green finance? Maria, I think these incoherent reporting methods are, could you say, hindering the transition to green finance, or at least how do you see it from your perspective?
I wouldn't say it hinders, it just requires more effort and do not make the processes efficient. I think what could hinder it is that if it gets too bureaucratic and specific around fulfilling certain specific parameters. We, for example, have one thing we're looking into right now where we would have a property, pure property, which would of course fulfill all our internal green requirements, but then we could also go in and support, so it would be a light industrial where we could also go in and support the operator. The operator would be in the supply chain, real estate supply chain, working on assets and processes that would benefit the real estate also in constructions, and trying to assess now that could banks finance this whole package, because it's both the building and the content in the building that would bring something to the sustainability. But it's difficult because it's a lot of classification that where should this one fall in? Is it then operations or is it actually real estate?
Yeah, that's a good point. What about Annina and Tita?
Well, I agree with Maria that when there are many banks involved, for example, in the syndicated arrangements or loans, the varying frameworks can be challenging. We share that view. And we have thought that maybe the standardization to green bond standards and standardizing the various frameworks could help to some extent this issue, but I'm not sure whether a completely one-size-fits-all package is really available. Then we can lose some nuances if we try to solve those. But I really thought about this, that what are the obstacles? From our point of view, the client demand at the moment is huge. We doubled the euro number or euro amounts of our sustainable finance from 2020 to last year. It doubled the euro amount. So we clearly see that there's a huge demand and we don't see any real obstacles. But if I really try to think about it, I could have to, on top of this syndicated loans framework problem I already raised. Taxonomy reliance can be good for somebody and somebody may not like it. This is something we understand, of course. Mm-hmm. And there has to be a way to still finance outside of the taxonomy. I completely share that. Then one thing could be also added, other supply chains, which have been mentioned and touched many times already today. We conducted a survey to our large corporations in the beginning of this year, and we had a lot of questions about sustainability and how does it impact to our largest corporates. And 84% of the respondents, which are the largest corporates in Finland, said that they have a pressure to somehow renew or revamp the subcontractor chains due to the requirements they have. And this is something, again, it will flow to smaller entities. And I think that the next thing we should all be interested about is to support the smaller entities, because the bigger you are, the better resources and the kind of access to, for example, legal advice like here in Castrén you have. But we have to also keep on board the rest.
Yes.
Yeah.
All need to be involved.
Yes.
Obstacles, well, what we have witnessed and seen is that the risk capital, the stage when the company is no longer a startup, but it's not yet necessarily having all the assets and security in place to qualify for commercial banks loan. That is where funding is needed, and we are bridging that gap. That's our aim. Unsecured loans, convertible loans, subordinated instruments that would then make the project bankable and perhaps then enable the commercial bank to take the position that is still needed, as quite often the projects are not funded by one party, but there are several financiers involved.
That's true. Just wanting to circle back to Annina, what you said about the volumes that have been rising in this sector, and I think, like, from loan market perspective, LMA published just in their latest yearbook the figures. It's 2019, from the whole loan volume, it was 6%. If you think like where had a sustainability angle, 2020 it was 20%, and now they're estimating that it's going to be doubled last year. So almost 50% of the whole loan volume had or has a sustainability angle, and that kind of shows the critical point of this whole discussion, that it's really hitting the finance market in a good way. And moving to the good stuff and the best practices around this matter, could you name some positive measures to support and accelerate this green transition, and how to reach these goals which have been set? Who wants to?
Well, we at least at Nefco, we are working very much hands-on with our clients and with the projects we are funding, as we are much smaller operation compared to OP, for example, and or the commercial banks in the Nordics. So that's very much very detailed analysis of the project, of its starting with the environmental aspects, of course, because if that is not there, or it's part of our exclusion list, or then we cannot get involved. But once that hurdle is tackled, maybe there are risk mitigation measures that need to be taken. Maybe there's an environmental and social action plan that is being agreed with the client. Then we can take the risk for the financial risk can be taken if the technology and the environmental aspects are tested.
Yes, thank you. What about you, Maria, from borrower's perspective?
Yes, and this is what I was mentioning about the delivery system that we have been working on in the last years, and we make an investment and then we exit at some stage, and we have now implemented internal tools for all of these stages. So to start with, we have it in the strategy and because that's basically the DNA, that everything we do needs to be sustainable. Now, when we have more knowledge all the time on the data, we have put the targets, which I mentioned, the more higher the CO2 targets than it's normally in the market. And that is good. What do we do? Yes, now we need to assess every single investment we do, that do they actually bring us towards these targets. So when we do an investment and bring it to the investment committee, we now launched a really detailed plan for due diligence that needs to be done. There are 13 different parameters that need to be fulfilled. There are targets for each of those. It has to do with both the environmental, but also the social side and the governance. And all in the IC tool itself, if those are not fulfilled, some of those turn red. You can still do the investment if you have a plan for how to get it green. And if you can't reach it, even with your measures, you pay a carbon tax. So far, it's an internal calculation, but it will be a real carbon tax at some stage. And this is integrated in all the investment material that we have. Then the next step is that when you have an investment, if you have a development, we have a special, let's see, it's called a Sustainable Development Performance Standard, an internal standard which needs to be followed, and all the data in the standard needs to be collected and stored. And then we do an LCA, life cycle assessment, for each development. And that data is then used to assess that what can be done better in the next step. If we do an investment, then we have the due diligence, but on all the standing assets we have in our portfolio during the next year, we need to do a sustainable action plan for standing assets. So every single asset in our portfolio will go through an internal process where we again collect data, put up measures that we need to do to reach our CO2 targets. And then also it has an impact on exit. We're not doing this solely for ourselves. We're also doing it for the next owner so that they get a document and they get evidence of what we have been doing.
Thank you. That sounds a big project, but with a good goal. That has been like the four main questions or trends we were talking about today. Do we have any questions in the audience, or do we move on with our own questions, which I have here? Or do we have, of course.
Thank you. I'm Anna Lehtonen from Nordea, and I work with the large corporates and institutions as well as sustainability-related matters. And perhaps rather a comment, but I totally agree that reporting is a key issue in sustainable finance and in implementing taxonomy and all other regulation that is flowing currently, but also to remind that this has been a really rapid transformation within the banks. So within the last 2 years, there have been a real tsunami of soft law and supervisor expectations as well as delegated regulation. So I think the banks are still also learning, and I hope that the reporting will be standardized at some point. But totally there's a will, so I think there will be also a way.
Thank you. That was a good comment, and I think that is something that has been noticed also. Yes. This side of the table, so to say, but yeah. And
maybe I could comment from our side that this is, I mean, we work with a lot of relationship banks, and this is where we see also that we really want to collaborate with the banks, because the banks just get the regulation, and you have to put it into reporting, and we test a lot. We see that what is actually possible to do and in the different jurisdictions, and what is actually possible to document right now, and where can we actually find some solutions to report it in the near future. So we really want to share this making a difference with all the counterparties, and we see that this is where we all need to work together.
I could very briefly, if I may, to say something about the best practices or practices. Actually, we discussed beforehand, prior to this panel, that it would be maybe useful to share some of the information about our ESG analysis or how does the process normally go, I could say a few words about that. So, like in any finance case, the credit worthiness is the starting point, and it can never be compromised due to the green. That would be greenwashing, and this is something we have to be extremely careful. And then what we do next is that once this credit worthiness status is clear, like it is in most cases, then we classify our corporate clients to industry buckets. So we see what kind of exposure they have in this industry bucket, so that we are making the assessment there. And then when we kind of estimate the corporate's level of ESG exposure in their peer group, then we can have a higher analysis if the risk is high, then medium for medium-sized or medium risk, and then obviously, and then that's a lighter analysis. And then if the exposure, ESG exposure for that client is very low, then we don't need any further additional analysis. And very typical themes or questions that the clients are facing or should be thinking and are thinking, of course, they are very often related and mostly related to climate change or then to human resources. I would say that half and half. These are probably one half of our question pattern. Questions towards climate change and human capital. So firstly, have they started to report or are they planning to report about the CO2 emissions? What kind of reduction targets they have? What kind of measures they have in place? That is very important. And also if they have any thoughts about already for the biodiversity, impact on nature, land areas, ecosystems, water and marine resources, and so on, like we discussed in the beginning of this panel. And then on the other hand, for the social part, more questions related to employee well-being, employee satisfaction. This is very important part of the S pillar and something we are having a focus on, what kind of measures the client has to improve those. And then also what kind of footprint or handprint or any print they have in the local communities, the local presence. That is very important as well and has to be walked along these environmental related areas as well. I see that that's important.
Thank you. Our time is running shortly to an end. Do we have any? We have questions. Sakari, please, or anyone else there?
Maybe I could ask a question from here also to the bank. When do we see these efforts in pricing?
As a lawyer, I can say that let's get back to that through the project.
Maybe we take that as a client-by-client analysis. But obviously, the credit risk and climate risk has to be included in the pricing. That is true. That is a requirement in the capital requirements regulation.
One question from my side, Sakari from Castrén Snellman. Sometimes you hear the term greenwashing. Did someone mention it here too? How do you see that phenomenon? Is there a risk for greenwashing going forward?
That's something that the taxonomy is also tackling, that they disharmonize. There are standards. It's a science-based criteria, although there is more room, I understand, in some of the objectives, like biodiversity is one where there's more room for the company to take their own interpretations on the matter. But this is one way of tackling with that. And of course, if you claim to be green, but you don't have the backup for it, as Maria has been explaining the processes, then there's a greater risk for, and perhaps no external review of your systems, etc. Then the risk is greater for greenwashing.
Yeah, that's true. Did we have any other questions, or do I summarize shortly? If not, Thank you for our panelists. It's been very interesting. Some key takeaways, I have some key words. So we've all noted or recorded that the volume of loans has rapidly increased in sustainable finance or bonds or in the sustainable finance sector. And of course, the development has been very quick, and it has had some problems, for example, on the reporting side and the taxonomy and the pros and cons related to that is something that all of the market participants need to tackle in their future work. So I want to thank you all, and we will be moving to the next panel shortly.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see so many of you here today. And I think this event is very important. It's very important that lawyers gradually start talking about sustainability. As you mentioned, there's been a tsunami of regulation, at least in the sustainable finance area. But otherwise, I believe that sustainability is still something quite new to most of the lawyers. So sustainability specialists have been talking about this for ages, but I believe the big picture is still that lawyers are still just entering the scene. Of course, there are some lawyers who've been working with this for a long time, but still, I believe it's very, very important that a great number of lawyers dig into these sustainability questions, because we can't possibly solve issues like the climate change, the biodiversity loss, and the related human rights problems unless we have lawyers actively working on the contracts, advising the management, participating in these compliance reviews, and drafting all the client clauses also in the contracts in the future. So thank you everybody already now for participating and showing interest in this. And also I would like to thank Legal 500 for the initiative to organize this event. So we already heard very interesting discussions concerning sustainable finance. Probably sustainable finance is currently leading, from a legal perspective, the green transition. But there is more regulation on the way. We are going to have the reporting directive in force sooner or later. And this spring, the Commission gave the corporate sustainability due diligence directive. It's not clear yet in what form that will come out. It might take 2 years. It might take 2 years for implementation. It's possible that it will be changed along the way, but there are also national initiatives on corporate sustainability. There's national law already in many countries. There's an initiative in Finland as well. It's kind of currently waiting for what is going to happen on the EU level and whether the EU proposal is proceeding or not. But it's pretty clear that we are going to have legislation on corporate sustainability. And that means that this is coming to the lawyers' table, finally. So today we have a very distinguished panel here. We have Riitta Afoselles from Neste, Head of Legal, M&A and Corporate. We have Marina Louhia, Senior Vice President, General Counsel, Head of Compliance and Sustainability Team. And we have Vesa Rahsin-Aho, Counsel and a very seasoned expert in corporate governance and corporate law from Castrén Snellman. And it's our purpose to discuss a little bit this the corporate sustainability due diligence directive and its impacts. But and Vesa will give a short presentation on that. But before we dive deep into the directive, I would like to give the possibility for first Riitta and then Marina to tell a little bit about what is on their agenda currently, and maybe some background from both Neste and Fingrid, and what are the issues that you are tackling with currently. So Riitta, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. So good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's really a pleasure to be here. Very interesting discussions up to now. My name is Riitta Forselles. I'm heading at Neste a team that's responsible for M&A and corporate matters. Neste is quite an inspiring company in a sense that it has really undergone a tremendous transition or transformation from being a sort of a local oil refinery into a leading producer of renewable and recycled solutions. So today, Neste is indeed the world's biggest producer of renewable diesel for road transportation and also for sustainable aviation fuel for air traffic. In addition to those, we're also developing solutions for the polymers and chemicals industry, including sort of waste to plastics solutions. So I would say that for Neste, really the whole business is based on the green transition, and it really sort of cuts through everything that we do. So also the strategy and the sustainability agenda obviously drives the M&A agenda, which is then on my team's desk. And in line with that, our M&A activities, we've been doing divestments, mainly in the fossil side. And then we've done acquisitions and new partnerships in the renewable space, but also supporting various new innovations and sort of the next horizon of solutions that Neste could offer. So we've looked into green hydrogen and various new feedstocks for renewable solutions, such as municipal solid waste or algae or these types of more difficult and new feedstocks. The sustainability is sort of embedded in all the M&A processes, so there is obviously quite robust due diligence in place already now. It's going to be very interesting to discuss the directive and what it brings. So looking forward to a good and interesting discussion with you. Thank you.
So hello to everyone on my behalf as well. Very delighted to be here, and thank you, Castrén, for the invitation. Legal 500, it's a pleasure. I work at Fingrid. I'm the general counsel of Fingrid, but I'm also heading our corporate responsibility, sustainability on the corporate level. I know that many of you do not know what Fingrid is, so in a couple of words, our main task is to build up and operate the main grid in Finland, being the high voltage grid, and also the cross-border interconnections. So that's one part. Then the second part, just to kind of put this into three main areas, is to be the system responsible partner for the electricity in the whole Finland, and then to develop and keep up certain electricity marketplaces. And when we think about those major tasks of ours, so we all see that there is a very strong link to sustainability. So to go back to the other words and talk sustainability, so we are to build up the green platform in Finland, meaning to link the renewable energy production to us, to consumers, then to maintain the security of supply. As the society is more and more dependent on electricity, we truly have a huge task on this. And also, when the energy production goes to more and more decentralized forms, so the task will not become easier, but rather more difficult all the time. And then to have this all going on, so we need to have well-functioning electricity market. So that's in the main core, our main tasks and our sustainability targets. So what we have been lately doing, or to my work, my agenda with my team, and I'm not doing this alone. I have a team where I have people from our business processes, our compliance officer, our communication director, and also from our kind of environmental department, to say reporting and finance. So it's a teamwork what we do. And if I just take the kind of last 2 weeks, what we have been doing, so we have updated our code of conduct, our supplier code of conduct, and we have just closed our kind of materiality analysis with our stakeholders, meaning that we have asked our internal, being our employees, and external stakeholders, how they see Fingrid's impact to sustainability. Where is the largest impact, and what kind of expectations do they have as to our sustainability impact? And then we have also now been working a lot with the taxonomy. I know, so we have just more or less finalized our internal guideline to taxonomy, and now we are finally going to the phase of starting the calculation phase and rehearsing whether we are and can do all the required calculations. And this will be linked also to our green finance framework update, as we have listed our green bonds in London and Dublin. So it's also very important to us, and also a legal requirement from 24, from the accounting period 23. So it's nice to be here, and I will try to bring a kind of in-house counsel approach to this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and welcome also from my part here to the summit. My name is Vesa Rosinho. I work as a senior counsel here at Castrén in the corporate governance team. I have been working all of my career with corporate law, primarily Finnish Companies Act related matters, everything relating to that, equity finance, shareholders meetings, boardroom advice. I have been involved in the preparation of the Finnish Companies Act, so I have kind of I have written parts of the current law, but now my focus here is to give you a short presentation of the EU proposal for a directive on corporate sustainability due diligence. So this is kind of only a draft directive that has been proposed this February, just immediately before the current war in Ukraine, or the Russian attack in Ukraine started. So basically, what the EU proposes is that companies would have a obligation to kind of use due diligence, or to kind of pay attention to human rights and environmental issues arising from their kind of subsidiaries and business relationships, i.e. the supply chain that who they work with, that they have to kind of monitor and supervise the chain to ensure that no issues relating to these matters arise from the operation. So it kind of extends the company's duty of care and supervision outside the company itself to its subsidiaries and supply chain. And the kind of the requirement is to primarily prevent the adverse impact, and if prevention is not possible, then to as a secondary goal mitigate the adverse impacts in these matters, and to the extent that there are kind of existing adverse impact to kind of end them, or then minimize them if ending them is not possible. That is the kind of the basic goal of the proposed directive. At least in this stage, as proposed, it would be applicable primarily to large enterprises, kind of all companies, and really emphasize the use of the word company. So it's primarily kind of applicable to only really corporate form entities that act as companies. That have exceed the turnover and employee thresholds listed, but in certain high impact industries or fields of operations that are listed here, like in agriculture, forestry, and kind of mineral and fuel extraction and processing industries, the thresholds are lower, and these fields are applicable both to companies that are established in EU, but also companies that are established outside EU that have operations in the EU that exceed these thresholds. So this is applicable also to non-EU companies that operate here. Basically, kind of there are several tools that the proposed directive includes. One is to require companies to prepare a plan to ensure that their business model and strategy are compatible with the transition to sustainable economy and with the Paris Agreement global warming limits. And in addition to kind of having to prepare or integrate these aspects into their strategies, there's also a kind of a requirement that if directors if the directors have incentives that are tied to strategy, this has to be reflected in the incentive, the variable remuneration of the director. So you have to kind of actually translate this into a kind of a clear incentive to actually implement these. So you can't. This of course aims at attempting to really avoid the greenwash, which was discussed in the previous panel. That this is not just something that is bolted on existing strategy as a separate item that has no true reflection on what the companies actually do. But of course the kind of a key question here is, at least to myself, is how does this actually work? That how do you kind of translate the environmental requirements into the directors' incentive plans? Of course, helpful in this is and you require for the incentives, you require kind of figures, numbers. You have to have data to be able to because it's very difficult to form incentive plans if you don't have kind of something to monitor. And of course here the other directives that are and regulations that are currently being implemented or are being planned, like the taxonomy regulation and the proposed corporate sustainability reporting directive, which is a separate proposed directive that extends the reporting requirements in these aspects, of course help then to kind of create these kinds of plans. And then in addition to this kind of a strategy and incentivizing package or part of the directive, then we have a kind of a sanctions and monitoring of the due diligence. There is a kind of requirement to have a supervisory authority in each member state. It's not, this is one of the several aspects where the directive proposal leaves the details of kind of up to the each member state to then implement. And it's, for example, if left open what kind of an authority would supervise this, and it's not clear or obvious in Finland who would be the. So would it be some existing agency in Finland that would be supervising this in future, or would there be a need to create an entirely new authority to supervise? The authority would have rights to impose sanctions, so they would be administrative sanctions, not criminal sanctions, on companies for kind of breaches of this, and the sanctions would be based on turnover. So this again, the details are open, but this obviously means that the sanctions can be substantial. And then in addition to these administrative sanctions, there would be companies' liability for damages caused through breaches of these human rights and environmental aspects. And in addition to companies' liability, then there would be directors' liability for breaching the director's duty of care relating to these matters. And these, of course, as a kind of a corporate lawyer, I'm very much interested in the liability aspects of law, and this is kind of what I have been focusing when I have looked at this proposed directive is these liability issues. Because the first of all, the company's liability for damages has kind of several aspects. Like said, the due diligence is not limited only to the company itself, but its subsidiaries and supply chain. So you have to you may become liable for actions of other entities, which raises questions of, for example, is there a double liability possibility that you the company, if, for example, if a subsidiary or supplier breaches an environmental regulation and causes damage, obviously the supplier itself is maybe liable for that, and then we have this kind of a parent company's liability. Is there a double liability possibility? The primary rule is that there shouldn't be such, that the primary requirement is that each company has primary liability for its own actions, and it's only the parent, if so speaking, parent company becomes liable only if it fails to supervise the supply chain or subsidiary. So there shouldn't be a double liability, but again, also considering that the supply chains are international, there may be, of course, overlaps in different countries. So this is one key aspect of this. And then the other aspect is, of course, the director's liability, which is of course a big issue, because the worry is that if there's a huge flood of damages claims against directives personally, so that would likely have a very significant adverse impact on the operations of major companies. There are several questions relating to both of this, because all of the liability issues are left open in the directive. So it's up to the implementation what happens in how these are implemented. In what law, what act are these sanctions and liabilities implemented in? Is it in the Companies Act? The Finnish Companies Act currently has no provisions on companies' own liability, so it regulates only the directors and shareholders' liability. So is there a need for a kind of to introduce provisions on companies' own liability, or would this be kind of based on the General Damages Act? Or is there a entirely new act on companies' liability? It of course affects the details of how does this work. And the director's liability, the key questions is the directive emphasizes that this is related to duty of care, and the current Finnish Companies Act says that the duty of care. Their care is of directors is towards the company only. So the company is only entity who can claim damages for general negligence. The liability towards third parties requires that the directors breach specific provisions. So the emphasis on duty of care seems to be that this is intended to be only a kind of general duty of care, which would imply that only the company could sue directors, which of course would limit the effective liability of directors towards third parties, because it would not be the chain would be that, for example, kind of somebody suffering environmental loss could only sue the company, and then it's up to the company to sue the directors if they have caused the loss. And all of these then end up with how kind of the details are. In addition to who can sue, the claims periods, because obviously, especially in environmental liability, the loss can be kind of shown or kind of evidenced only several years after the damage has been done. So there may be a need for long claims periods, which then of course creates issues. And if it's too short, then it may kind of water down the whole idea. And then of course kind of for example, burden of proof. Who has to do the directors have a obligation to show that they have acted with due care, or is it always the claimant that has to show that there is negligence, for example? So all of these questions are open and up to the kind of actual implementation. So there's a huge kind of work in if the proposal is accepted, how does this actually work? So many questions, and may of course have kind of the devils in the details. The bottom line here is that this doesn't the proposed directive doesn't change the underlying primary driver of Finnish corporate law, or EU corporate law in general, which is kind of currently a shareholder primacy-based system, where the kind of purpose of companies is to generate profit for shareholders, and this is kind of all of this doesn't change it. It just kind of add limitations and add factors that the companies have to take into account when pursuing this profit purpose of theirs. So this is, as Anna instructed, I used some slightly more time because we were in advance of schedule. So I did as commanded, and now I think we are ready to move to the panel discussion.
Yes. Thank you, Vesa. Thank you, everybody, for the short introductions and the presentation. First of all, what do you think about the main impacts of this corporate sustainability due diligence directive? What will it change? What is the big change that it might bring with it? Who wants to start?
Well, I can start. I think at Nest that we have a pretty okay starting point, because we are already doing our supply chain due diligence. We have sort of the processes in place. We also have grievance mechanisms in place. We publicize in our web pages the grievances and so on. So I think the basics are there. I think it will definitely sort of even further enhance this topic in the board's agenda. We do have the policies, but I think we have to sort of review the policies and make sure that, you know, we sort of capture all the new requirements and present them to the board. Obviously, the board will be interested in all of these aspects that Vesa just mentioned and what it means for their liability and so on. So I think the basics are there. I think from our perspective, we would have sort of hoped that also the SMEs would be captured by this legislation, because actually the area where we're somewhat struggling is that, you know, the access to that, you know, information and being able to cascade down the supplier code of conduct and so on and so forth. So it would have been sort of a plus that also the SMEs would be obligated, and it would even, you know, make it perhaps a bit easier to fulfill the obligations. But I think it's a step in the right direction and pretty much in line with what we are already doing.
Thank you. How about Marina?
Well, I agree with Rita on the kind of liability issues and so what you say, kind of as to the board of directors and so on. But I also think that companies are in very different stages regarding this. And if I think about Fingrid and our supply chain, so we are not there. We are doing a lot of audits and so on, but to go kind of through the entire supply chain. So I really, to be honest with you all, struggle with seeing how we do implement all of it. It is a challenge for us at least, and I'm very honest here. So it's not in place yet. So we need to work with that a lot. And then of course we see the kind of taxonomy link there to when you have the 1.5 requirement also, and all the reporting measurements, whether and how those will be then implemented through the directive. So that's a question as well. So I see a lot of more reporting and also a huge need of resources, and I mean kind of internal resources, but also advisory resources. I mean different kind of consultants. So there will be a need of that, and as I have understood that these resources, at least in Finland, are already in a very kind of large use. So it wouldn't mind to have some more to this field, as Anna was kind of, but what would I say, indicating or having the invite here in the beginning.
How about Vesa? What do you think?
Yes, I agree, especially with what Marina said about kind of the increased reporting. So this is obviously kind of increases the and has to, like I said, that in order for the incentives and strategy to work, you have to have the figures, and so you can. This is meaningless if you don't have the reporting, because it drives the business. But of course, then it adds the kind of the work and bureaucracy here. And at worst, of course, at worst this would be just a tick the box exercise, which is kind of just meaningless bureaucracy. But of course, at best, like with what kind of the leading companies are already doing, this is kind of integrated with the strategy of the company, and then it works. I hope and expect it to work then if it's kind of properly integrated with so it is not kind of separate from the separate compliance, but it is an integral part of the strategy. But then again, the liability issues, the legalization of these issues may also have it of course emphasizes the importance of this, but the legalization may also have an adverse impact in the sense that it may make companies more risk averse and careful. Like for example, how do you kind of what kind of PR and IR kind of aspects you have of this, what you can say in public, because especially if you have a director's liability, it makes people just more careful, which may be a negative thing.
So
also.
it could be a positive thing, or it could be a negative thing.
It emphasizes the importance, but then it may also kind of make you kind of too careful and kind of just tick the boxes to ensure that there's no liability, which would be bad. Yeah. So there are both good and bad things.
Yeah, and if I may clarify to some that the fact that we have our sustainability strategy integrated to our business strategy kind of is not enough. We still need to do a lot of more. And when we think about the supply chain requirements, so it's I do agree with the kind of the target of that, and I think it's very good. But in practice, how the companies will implement that, I kind of think will either make it a huge success story or destroy the whole good target of that requirement.
Yeah, and basically these sustainability professionals have been wholeheartedly doing this work for decades. And now that lawyers are entering the scene with their red pens and ticking boxes, it's not necessarily just a good thing. It may be a good thing, but let's say that it's that's not really probably the aim of the whole thing. You want to comment?
Yeah, I would comment. I think definitely these kinds of directives, they're making sort of these reputational risks now also legal risks. But then if sort of the sustainability is really at the core of your brand promise and your products, I think the reputational side is actually more important, and that risk is bigger. And if you think about the supply chain, so with social media and everything, if you have a problem in your supply chain, it can sort of surface anytime. There can be like a video going viral, and I think the impact is way bigger than maybe even the board liability and things like that. But it's really maybe for companies where sustainability is not so strongly linked to their products, it becomes more sort of making sure you don't break the regulation. Yes. But if you're sort of in the sustainability business, the credibility of your products and your message is really at the core.
Right. Maybe also a comment concerning this, what will change. I believe quite many companies currently are very focused on what they do themselves and what their own subsidiaries are doing, and are less focused on the supply chain and what their business partners are doing, what their suppliers and subcontractors are doing, and what are the working conditions there, what are the human rights issues, what are the also the environmental impacts, etc. And probably taking that into account for many companies who are not where you are already, taking that into account is probably going to be one of the big aspects.
Yeah, and we are not perfect in any way. Just saying that we put a lot of focus into the supply chain audits and have quite high level of transparency already now, and through the grievance mechanisms and so sort of trying to tackle and engage with our suppliers and sort of drive the change there. But obviously it's not perfect, and there's issues to tackle.
You mentioned the position of SMEs not being caught by the directive or the proposal as it now stands. I think it might put more pressure on the big companies to kind of educate the SMEs who are going to be in their supply chain. Would you agree? Or how do you see that? Do you see that you would have a stronger role in educating and kind of teaching the SMEs also on their own sustainability path?
I think the previous comment was more sort of sometimes we struggle with access to information and getting responsiveness from our supply chain to sign up for the supplier code of conduct or kind of work with us to tackle any issues that have sort of been uncovered. So maybe if the regulation would apply, that would be, additional.
Make your life easier.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. I think a second point, I think public sector definitely should be. It shouldn't just be the corporations, driving the green transition. I think public sector, really should be obligated under this as well.
I totally, like I said, that the kind of one of the aspects here is that the directive applies only to companies. So it's kind of a cooperatives and public sector and all these kind of more atypical entities. Kind of how does that make the system more less neutral? Because if it's only for the bad corporations that are caught by this.
I think that to many companies, the largest step is the measurement. That's the hardest part to start, kind of what to measure and how to do it, and to have the resources for it. And that I think goes to SMEs as well. So it's not so easy, not for those who have been measuring a lot. So kind of doing that, but still now when we start to rehearse with the kind of taxonomy calculations, so we have our top engineers doing that. I try to not to be involved in those, but kind of to understand how they do it and what is the kind of what we are doing, but kind of not taking my calculator, no.
You also mentioned the position of the board of directors, that the sustainability issues are coming more and more to the board of directors. What is your kind of general understanding on the kind of are the board generally? I'm not just talking about your companies, but generally, maybe also a question to Vesa. Are the board of directors generally ready to take this challenge? Is there enough knowledge? Are there experts on sustainability, or is it like Marina said that we would need a lot more knowledge in this area? How do you see the situation?
Well, I think that kind of what the current composition of boards and their capacity to do this, I would bounce the ball back to kind of Marina and Titti that, but of course it's kind of all of this. The board has to rely on the kind of the companies administration, of course, to supply like the data and the expertise. But of course, the board needs to have the understanding to kind of to actually integrate this into the strategy. But whether that currently exists, I think that you are better persons than me, perhaps, to take a view.
Yeah.
Would there need to be new persons, new kinds of people in the boards because of this?
I think it's definitely high on the board agenda already, as is, and it's really sort of cutting through so many, functions and business units, at least at Neste. So there's all of this reporting, which we've talked about. Then there is linked to the reporting, there is all of this sort of sustainability data, how you're able to collect and aggregate the data that links to the climate commitments you have made. How are you able to track whether you're on track with those commitments? And we have also in our share-based incentive schemes already this GHG reduction target. So then it becomes again something that's linked to the compensation and the performance-based incentives are linked to the sustainability agenda. There's all the policies that have to, be approved by the board. So there's the M&A agenda, the joint ventures. So I think it's really kind of cutting through everything and comes to the board level also from, a variety of things. We talked about financing in the previous session, so in financing transactions and so on. So I think it's in each and every board meeting. Marina probably knows even better.
Well, I just recently read a NPS survey of Finnish medium and large-sized companies, and according to this survey, 40 or a bit less than 40% have integrated sustainability to their business reporting. So there is still kind of 60%, which a part is considering this or preparing this, and then there is this part. I think it's what was kind of 10% who haven't even started or thought about it. So it's again, there is a kind of large variety kind of between the different companies. And I think that in large companies, listed companies, the kind of level of knowledge is much higher than when you go to a smaller sized companies. But then again, I was thinking about this when you were talking about lawyers, that we should just learn to speak ESG language. It's a kind of my encouragement to all of you. As we as lawyers, we also would need to talk the same language with the kind of sustainability people, with the board and so on. And through that, we could also better translate the requirements to our different internal stakeholders, whether it's the board or business people, procurement, finance, communication, whatever. So let's start the new language.
Good proposal. And by the way, if there are questions or comments from the audience, just raise your hand and you'll get the microphone. There's one already.
Thank you. I'm Anton Schüller from Nordea, and I would like to circle back to a comment you earlier made about the due diligence. As we understand it, one of the things that's been introduced now is that the due diligence is no longer risk-based. Rather, it needs to be more all-encompassing in this proposal. And secondly, when it comes to liability, there's some should-have language. So you could, in theory, be liable for things you should have had in place. And also that, of course, exponentially increases certain types of risks. So I'm really interested to hear if you already have some considerations in this context.
Very good question, and you're really kind of picking quite difficult items. I think there's definitely ground to cover to really make the due diligence cover the full value chain. I think it will be a challenge for all corporations that are captured by this, even those who have relatively good measures in place and are sort of doing the audits and engaging with the supply chain on a regular basis. I maybe turn to Vesa. What you should have done? How do you think? What should we write into the minutes and stuff to say that?
Yeah, this is a kind of a very the kind of the actual scope of the, like said, the devils in the details, and the implementation is open. So there are lots of open questions here. But the directive kind of the directive actually has kind of which was perhaps not that clear in my presentation. Then in addition to kind of these administrative sanctions and liability for damages, there's kind of the one additional aspect is that you have to, the companies are liable to, or they're obliged to kind of mitigate the adverse impacts and rectify them if they already exist, which is separate from liability for damages. So you have to kind of, if you for example notice that there is an environmental liability, you have to clean the operations and so on, which is not separate from liability for damages. So there's kind of these issues, and really like I said in my kind of introduction, each entity should be primarily liable for its own actions, but the parent company is kind of or the head of the supply chain is liable for supervision, and it can't rely only on kind of what the entities lower in the chain tell them. So if it's obvious that this is not enough, it doesn't release from liability. That's something that this may touch upon what you say, what should be done. So they have to, the supervision has to work in practice. If it works only on paper, it's not sufficient. It doesn't release you from liability. So how does that work in practice? Again, I don't know in detail, but that's the idea, that you have to have a genuinely working kind of a due diligence system there. And kind of considering this one aspect of Finnish, but also EU kind of a liability law or the tort law, is that liability law is primarily and corporate liability is process-based. So it's kind of whether you have liability is not directly linked to what actually has been done. What is the end result? Is there an environmental liability or not? But how did the process work? If you have followed the process, you don't have liability even if there is an actual loss somewhere. Only if you have failed to follow the process, i.e. you have acted negligently, only then we look at what has actually been done in order to calculate what's the amount of damage you have to compensate. But that's not kind of that's only the end result. Before you end up there, you only kind of look at whether you have followed the procedural rule. I don't know if this is something that does this relate to anything you you ask about.
No, but we have several comments. You know.
I think Vesa makes a really important point, because in a way it's about, with your supply chain, is the approach more to engage and sort of drive a change, or is it more compliance, tick the box that, okay, they have signed our supplier code, we have put in place these contractual clauses that, you know, say that we have followed the due diligence directive. And I think, you know, for the green transition and for the social side, I think the first is more effective, that you're actually engaging to make a difference. But when we lawyers come into play, we might want to have this, you know, process and tick the box, and we update our general terms and conditions of supply, and we put in good clauses, and then we think, yeah, it's done.
But then we have the question here that do lawyers need a change of mindset? And how is this impacting the role of lawyers in general?
Well, I would go back to the language again. Yes, and this is important, but we need to work together. This is a team effort, kind of as a whole. But we also need more the processes to be in place, and that can be burdensome to compliance function or so in the beginning, but we need to get them rolling. As we at Fingrid, for example, we sometimes have investments which are very complicated power lines and bus station building up constructions in very hard places, and so it may be very difficult for a board member to truly understand what it is, and is this investment proposal good or bad, or what would be the alternative, or am I, as a board member, do I have the courage to say, no, you shouldn't draw the power line there, it should go from kind of through these villages. And then we go to the exact what Vesa said, we go to the processes. You need to be, or you need to ensure that the processing in place, it's good enough. It's not good enough, but it's well working, and the people are experts who are doing it, and they truly consider the different kind of alternatives. And what we, for example, do, we also do the internal audit on our processes, so that the board members may or can be ensured that the process is in place, and through that the duty of care is kind of fulfilled. So,
yeah, you mentioned compliance. So how is this changing the role of the compliance function within firms? Should they be considering the ESG risks already? Maybe more?
Well, they are.
They are.
And they should, and
yeah.
not of course in all companies, and they may have different angles, but as they usually are lawyers, they should also be able to talk the language with the other people, with the business, and come with the new requirements to the procurement, and to kind of, we need to do this together. It's not something that there would be some kind of office somewhere, and then you go there and ask that, may I do this? And there is one person that, no, that's not okay, you can't do that. But you need to kind of create the process and have all the people to kind of understand it and then start to work on it.
Yeah, I very much agree with what Marina is saying, that it's really sort of a cross-functional effort in companies. So you need the lawyers and you need the compliance, you need the sustainability, you very much need the business representatives. They're at the heart of the finance. The finance as well, and you know, we have public affairs who look at regulation. That's very, very relevant for our business. So it's really kind of cross-functional, and I think for us lawyers, there's no more sort of escaping this ESG and sustainability agenda, because even in M&A, there's like a trend that should these sustainability and ESG related representations and warranties become sort of fundamental reps in a share purchase agreement. So you really cannot sort of escape that it's kind of becoming relevant in all areas of legal practice or law.
There's a question.
It's in a way a constant learning.
Hi, I'm Emma Jelly. I'm former general counsel at Google UK and Ireland, and now I'm an executive coach in Finland. And of course, I'm really interested in all the mindset points. But if I may first comment on this, this cross-functional approach to sustainability is making me think about back in the day when GDPR came, and we have this privacy by design principle. And at the beginning of GDPR, there was all this talk of it landing on legal, and legal very quickly realised we cannot make ourselves privacy compliant if we hog this. It has to be dispersed through the whole organisation. We have to engage with different stakeholders. We have to be a leader, a cheerleader, and a storyteller and an enthuser on this topic, and bring everyone together. And here I feel like we have sustainability by design. And we need to rise to the challenge and not see ourselves as box ticking, you know, let's just redline this, because it might be that we are the only voice in the boardroom that is speaking to a board that is having their ears closed to sustainability. They don't need a legalistic law reader. They need someone to make them excited and enthused. And furthermore, on the mindset thing, I would add that what a wonderful opportunity that ESG is coming now, because it is coming increasingly towards the legal profession. And I can say from my coaching practice that, wow, there are an awful lot of 40-something lawyers who are seeking more meaning in their work. There are people who really want, they're looking for, what is my impact? What's my legacy? What am I going to do that's beyond this day to day? What a gift. We have a gift to think of planet Earth as our client. Okay, whatever medium will get you there, this law firm or that company, but that's where you're going, and just rise to the challenge.
Thank you. I think that's a very excellent comment, and I think it's important kind of to see the possibilities to make an impact and not just focus on risks and managing them and so on. So yes, please.
Yes, I like what you say. My name is Ralph Lindbeck. I'm from Esg Corporation. And I need to speak up. I've been listening to wonderful panel with very bright ideas and good ideas. Thank you for that. And let me try to contribute to the discussion. I think that, first of all, I would like to come to the regulation part. I think it's for the in-house legal profession that we shift our mindset in a sense that we start to ask questions which are slightly different. First one being, have we identified the issue? whether it has an impact, and if it's adverse, and finally, if it's material. So 4 key questions. And from there then do the assessment and take it on board in the boardroom or in the management teams. Flag it. So that's a good starting point. So with those words, slightly connecting to what you just said here, but to build on that, I have at the end a question to you as well. To build on that, I think, and this is my personal view, I think we have to take a mindset where we have to live with crisis for a bit. We have to live with the assumption that there will be conflict. And from there, we have to adopt more or less how to prevent that from happening. We don't go to court. It doesn't really pay off. The green transition, and now I use your word, planet, Mother Earth, climate, will continue regardless of any regulations. It will take its time. We are doing our utmost in order to get on board with new regulations and new concepts, and that's fine, that's beautiful. The dilemma which we have, it's overwhelming. The reporting structure is overwhelming. We are not mature enough in order to address it. And now I come to my question. It boils down to, do you foresee that there will be a tsunami of conflicts, litigation, class actions, and so forth, which we will have in front of us here in the near future because of this where we are right now? Who wants to start? Thank you.
Well, yeah. We just had a sort of a meeting this morning actually between our legal and sustainability team, just looking at these various, joint agenda points and things like that. And just one thing came to my mind from that discussion. I think this litigation relating to sort of greenwashing is probably a trend that will be increasing. I think we're seeing it more and more. It can be a tool for good, for sort of calling out false promises, but at the same time, I think in the whole sustainability agenda, I would rather see a focus on developing technologies, solutions, and products that can, drive the green transition forward, because very many different things will be needed in that toolbox. So it's not absolute. You don't have the perfect solution. You need, various tools to make the change, and we really do need to make that change. So I would more want to focus on driving the change and less on the compliance and the liability scheme. But I think we inevitably probably will see a rise in that one as well.
Short comment for Esa, then I think we have to close.
I wouldn't as such expect this kind of this new green transition to directly increase litigation as such. But the increasing liability is a general trend, because kind of the US shows the way that litigation is increasing in general, and the US practices are kind of they are coming to Europe and Finland in general. And it also affects this field, but it's not kind of something that I wouldn't expect this to be emphasized here, but that's unfortunately just a trend, general trend.
Okay. Thank you. I'm afraid I have to close this discussion. Oh my God, I don't want to do that, because this is so interesting and this is so exciting, and thank you to our panel. And everyone who's present here, you are welcome to continue the discussions over drinks and some snacks. And to those who are watching the webinar, thank you very much for participating. I think we created well, maybe something a little bit unique and new, and I hope that there will be more board meetings in the future where lawyers will bring up these sustainability issues, and I think that is the direction in which we are heading in any case. But in any case, each and every one of you has the possibility to accelerate the green transition, and I wish you very much luck with that effort. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Legal 500. And yes.
For me, for the sake of sustainability, I hope that most of you will stay for snacks and drinks and chats. But if you are leaving, if you could drop this into a bowl at the door, that we're actually going to reuse this. That's all for me. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.